Hello and welcome to English Digest. I'm Seb.
And I'm Elsie. Hi, Seb. How are you?
I'm doing good, yeah. I'm a little bit tired. I was hanging out with my friends last night, stayed up a little bit late.
Oh, interesting that you mentioned your friends because we're going to talk about friends today.
Oh, really? Okay, what a great topic. We haven't done that before, I think.
Right. So we all have friends, and for me, my friends play an important part in my life. What do you think are some of the benefits of having friends?
Oh, wow. There's so many. I mean, it's difficult to think of something which is not good about having friends. I think it would be a very lonely experience not to have friends, right? Like whenever you're stressed or whenever you need somebody to turn to, somebody to talk to about your problems. If you didn't have friends, I think that would be very difficult. I guess you could pay someone to listen to you, but it's not really the same, is it? As having somebody who's there supporting you.
So, like you said, after a long work day, you need to maybe hang out with your friends?
Yes.
To release your stress?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And sometimes you'll need some advice from your friends too.
Yes, very true, very true. After a long work day, I might want to take the edge off, relax. And hanging out with my friends is a really great way for me to do that, especially if I'm very busy or very stressed at that time. But yeah, if I have some problem that I'm dealing with or I'm not sure what to do, then yes, being able to air out my worries or talk about my problems with my friends is a really useful thing to do. You know, like it's very helpful to me.
Yes, but do you have this friend that is very different from you? Like you two are totally different? Like you are good friends, close friends?
Yeah, I have some friends that are different to me in different ways. I have one who I share a very similar interest in music, but that's the only thing that we share. So we talk a lot about music, and I really enjoy going to his house and listening to a lot of old records together. But actually, how we spend our time and the rest of the things that we do with our days are very, very different. So it is interesting to hang out with him and see like the other people who come and join us. It's always a very interesting mixed group of people. What about you? Do you have any unusual friends, let's say, like friends that you wouldn't expect to have?
I used to have, but not now anymore.
Okay.
They became my friends at one time, but now we're not friends anymore because we're so different.
How did they become your friends?
Maybe just we met in high school, we met in college. Yeah, and because we were classmates, so we became friends.
Right. We have an expression for that actually in English, friends of convenience. And that is friends that you make when you are in high school or you're at work, some place where you have to be in one place regularly. You spend a lot of your time together, but you might not have that many similar interests. All right, so we're talking about unusual or unlikely friends today. Should we take a closer look at the assignment?
Sure. 今天的写作提示呢，说到的是我们常说物以类聚，但是每个人身边总有一个与自己在某方面相差甚远的朋友。请你写一篇短文介绍你这位看似不可能的友人。那文分两段哦，第一段描述这位朋友在举止打扮或者是观念想法上有哪一些特点会让你或其他的人觉得你们不太可能结为好友。那第二段描述你与这位友人成为好友的契机或是关键点。文长呢至少120个单字。
I like that you used that expression at the beginning, 物以类聚. We have a similar expression in English, actually.
What
I think
is it?
I was translating this myself, but birds of a feather, or the longer version is birds of a feather stick together, like a rhyming saying. Have you heard that one before?
Yes, 所以就是鸟有同样的羽毛就会聚在一起。Then it means 物以类聚。In Chinese.
So it's the same.
Yeah.
So if you're similar, you have similar interests or similar personalities, you're likely to hang out with each other.
True.
It tends to be in English, though, we tend to only use it for people. So we won't use it for like things, or situations, but we do say it about people. So yeah, we often say that birds of a feather stick together, but everyone has that one friend who is very different from them. So the assignment says, Please write a passage introducing a surprising or unlikely friend of yours. It should have 2 paragraphs. In the first paragraph, describe what it is about your friend that makes it seem like the two of you would never be friends. In the second paragraph, talk about how you became friends. You should write at least 120 words. Okay, so normal structure, normal things that we need to do here. But here's a question. Do you have any friends that you didn't like or never thought you would be friends with when you first met them?
I think it's similar to the question in the introduction, right? I didn't think they would become my friends, but somehow we did become friends at one time.
Ah, okay.
But as time goes by, you'll notice that actually you two are really different and maybe you don't have to hang out together any longer, or I don't know, they just fade away.
That's very true, actually. I mean, for me, I think the difference between these questions is one could be your friends are very different, but for this one, what I was thinking of is I had a friend who I was very close with in university, and she was studying at my university for the first year that I was there, and we hung out all the time. And then when she went back to the UK afterwards, she visited every year for the rest of my degree. But when I first met her, I didn't like her at all. I found her annoying. I didn't think any of her jokes were funny. I didn't like anything about her. But I think after a week, something changed. And I realized that I was judging her too quickly. I always use this as an example of why I'm a horrible judge of character. So that basically means a horrible judge of character is somebody who guesses things about someone's personality and who someone is, who judges someone, but who always makes the wrong judgments. So if you think you're going to hate someone and then they turn out to be a nice person, then you're not a very good judge of character. Or if you think somebody's very trustworthy and then they lie to you, then you're not a very good judge of character. So yeah, I mean, the moral of this story is don't judge people. That's what I learned from that experience.
Yeah, true. 那再来呢，我们要 develop an approach. 我们来看看呢，什么是叙述文。好，我们今天的这个文体是叙述文。那叙述文又是什么呢？叙述文是一种运用非常广泛的文体，常常出现在大考的作文题目当中。那常见的类型有：第一种，描述经验或事件；第二种，描述物品；第三种，描述人物。那我们今天呢，就是要来描述人物。好，本单元叙述的是一位你看似不可能结为的好友人，那属于对人物的叙述。
Exactly. We'd basically call this a narrative in English. Narratives are stories, so they tell us things about things that happened, normally in the past. The assignment is asking us to write about an unlikely friend we have. So the best way of doing this is with a story. Because narratives are stories, they are one of the most common types of creative writing that we come across. The Harry Potter series counts as a narrative because they tell the story of a boy wizard named Harry. I think one of the favorite narratives that I've ever read is a book called Circe by Madeline Miller, which is all about a witch from a Greek myth, from the Greek myth, the Odyssey. And it's all about her life and all about the interesting people that come to visit her as a witch. So obviously this is about someone's life, it's about things that happen to her, and so it's its own kind of narrative. We could also call it a novel, which is a name for a really long narrative that you can turn into a book, basically. So Elsie, what should we know about writing narratives?
OK， 在我们认识叙述文之后呢，我们要来看到是要写什么，还有怎么写。那英文作文的架构基本上分为引言 introduction， 文章的主体 body， 还有结论 conclusion。那本篇叙述文呢，也是以这样的架构发展。那 introduction 是文章的引言，说明文章要探讨的主题跟动机。全文的主旨句，也就是 thesis statement， 常常在第一段就会点出来。那在描述人物的文章当中啊 ，introduction 可以有以下几种写作的方式。第一个，直接说明你要描述的对象是谁；第二个，简单说明你对这个人的看法或是印象。
Right, exactly. So we want to talk about what we're writing about and give a brief explanation. So those are very good points. Personally, I think introductions are best when they include some kind of problem or drama that can be developed into a story. In the case of our story, having an unlikely friend, we might outline the big differences between you and your unlikely friend, or explain how we couldn't stand them, how we didn't like them in the beginning. That gives the reader something to become interested in because they're thinking, how on earth did these people become friends by the end of the story? How is their relationship going to change? So that gives us kind of an interesting starting point for our journey.
Right, so it can be a hook, right?
Exactly, it's a hook.
让读者呢关注你的文章，吸引他们的注意力。那再来我们就要到 body 的部分了。body 是文章的主体，那必须叙述许多相关的细节，就是 supporting details。那细节呢必须和主题相关哦。要使主题生动，要让人印象深刻。那根据本篇的提示，主体呢可大致分为2个部分。第一个就是对于此人物内在或是外表的具体叙述。第二个，回顾你与这位友人确立朋友关系的时间点。那在确认主体内容之后啊，可以将所需的资讯写进对应的段落当中。
In the body, you might also want to include a twist or unexpected development that surprises the reader. Perhaps you and your friend hated each other, but then your teacher paired you up with each other on a final project. Or you had to help your friend, you saw your friend getting bullied or something and you helped them. Something unexpected. And all of those things would be interesting twists in the story. They're unexpected events that change the dynamic, change the relationship between you and your friend.
再来呢，我们要看到 conclusion 的部分，就是文章的结论了。那我们要说明意义、体会还有影响哦。可以再次简单的强调此人物和主题的关系对你产生什么改变，或是带给你什么样的感受。那这样子的方式可以让文章结构完整，也可以呼应第一段，达成首尾呼应的效果。
Remember, your conclusion doesn't have to just be, that's why we're friends now. We already know that from the assignment and the introduction, that you're talking about your friend. So, how can you do an interesting conclusion for your story? Well, you could describe your relationship now, talk about what you do together, or, why your friend is special to you. You might want to talk about your plans for the future, like, are you going to go on a trip together? Are you going to the same university? Things like that could happen later, that give the story some continuum, give it some continuation. And then you could also reflect on what you've learned by making this unlikely friend. So earlier I said that what I learned by making my unlikely friend in school was that you shouldn't judge people. But there's lots of things that you could have learned through this experience. So think about it. What has changed about you through having this friendship? That might be something good to include in your conclusion.
Yes, and before you start writing, 在写作之前呢, you have to move on to your brainstorming. So here we see some notes about this special friend written down.
Right, so this is a good starting point. We've got a profile of someone. Now, a profile of someone is just a basic description, kind of introduction to someone's personality, who they are. And so we've got this friend, Brandon, who is outgoing, curious, easy to talk to, likes jokes, and hugs people goodbye. So somebody who sounds very friendly and very confident as well. So this is a good start, but I want you to make a second list too. So the second list should be the same structure as this one, but it should be for you. So describing yourself. And when you're making these two lists, what you should think about is personality traits and ways of being that are very different between you and your friend. So if you're writing a second list next to this Brendan list, you might want to say that you're shy, or you might want to say that you feel awkward when you're talking to people you don't know. Maybe you're sensitive. You can also include some positive things about yourself. You don't need to be negative. And you can include some negative things about the other person. But the point is to create differences, because then you can think about, okay, why weren't we friends in the beginning? What things should I talk about that outline the fact that we had a difficult start to our relationship?
Right, that is a very important tip. 所以你的个性一定跟这个 Brandon 不一样，那你可以把它写下来，好，对比一下，你会更知道你想要抓取哪一些重点来放到你的文章当中。And then for the paragraph 2, you need to write about how you guys became friends. So for the notes here, we see how we became friends. Number 1, we met in the hospital. Number 2, he was lively even after surgery. And number 3, he made me feel comfortable.
These are all really good points. I particularly like that we have this setting in the hospital. hospital for me gives a lot of possibilities to this story because obviously we don't just go to the hospital on a normal day. Something big has normally happened. So this makes us interested. If I start my story, I met Brendan when I was in the hospital, that makes the reader immediately think, why were you in the hospital? Why was he in the hospital? What happened? And you could say a lot of different things then. You could be sick. He could have been unwell. You could be a nurse, You could say that you were working at the hospital and he was a patient there. There's lots of different things that you could say.
Yeah, or how you guys helped each other through difficult times, and that's why you became friends.
Exactly. So it's an interesting place for a relationship to start. And it sounds like Brendan was a very enjoyable person, a very nice person to be around from the start. So that also makes me think, why weren't they friends in the beginning? Or what was surprising about his good behavior? Those are other things that you might want to include in your first paragraph.
Right.
All right, so I think it's time for us to make our outline, start planning the structure of narrative. So now it's time for us to organize our thoughts. We're going to be using the same outline structure we normally use, but a quick recap, what is an outline? What is an outline, Elsie?
An outline will help you develop your essay, develop your writing well.Yes,
exactly.
Or better. 所以呢，我们在写作之前一定要先有架构出来，你不要一看到我题目就开始去写，这样子你的文章会比较凌乱。好，先有个 outline， 有个架构，一步一步的再去发展你的文章。
Exactly. So outlines help us organize our thoughts logically, and they also help us decide what to include and what not to include. So,for me, I think one thing that's very helpful is to write a bullet list with the main bullets being for your main points and then sub-points, sub-bullets underneath for supporting information. So you might want to have, your first bullet might be something like, what was my relationship with Brandon? Or how did I meet Brandon? And then you can explain that. Your next point might be, how did that change? So those are things that you can begin with. For me, I think it's really good, especially if you're doing this for an exam, to write this in as few words as possible. So one mistake I see a lot of people doing when they're writing is they write their outline in full, beautiful English, and they write long sentences, and they said, I met Brandon when I was at the hospital and I was feeling unwell, and I loved the way that he smiled and laughed when he was sitting in his hospital bed and something else. But this is not actually your story. This is just planning. So just try and put setting, hospital, Brandon's personality, happy, confident, try and keep it as short as possible and save all the nice English for your actual story. This is just to give you a little bit of structure. So Elsie, what do we see the outline for our first paragraph in this example?
我们第一段的主题句第一句呢是 People are always shocked when they learn I'm friends with Brandon。他用这样的句子开头，让读者呢有期待，想说这个 Brandon 到底是怎么样的一个人？好，为什么人们会觉得你跟 Brandon 当朋友这么样的震惊呢？好，那因为呢我们的题目当中要我们在第一段描述这位朋友在举止打扮或是观念想法上有哪一些特点。那这里呢，它着重的是在 personality 个性的部分，所以我们看到 A we're completely opposites， 好，我们呢完全的不一样。B he's outgoing and curious， 他很外向，很好奇。C he likes to talk。D he tells jokes and he laughs loudly when he hears a good one。E he hugs people goodbye。 好，这一些是 Brandon 会做的事情，那代表我们的作者他不会去做这些事，因为第一句就告诉我们了 We are completely opposites.
Yes, and that's a very efficient way, I think, if you don't have too much time to explain the differences, because here we don't need to explain everything about the writer. They don't need to say that much about themselves because they said we're opposites and then they gave one side of it. If you're the opposite, you have to be very different from that, right? So we already know that this person is probably a bit shyer.
Or doesn't like to talk, or likes to stay at home.
Yes, exactly. Somebody who's like that. One other thing, that I like is this use of the word shock. People are always shocked, or we could say surprised, because shock shows that people think, wow, okay, that's unexpected. We know immediately there's going to be a big difference between the author and Brandon. So that is another interesting thing. It creates a little bit of interest at the beginning that encourages the reader to read more.
是的，就是我们刚刚提到的 hook， 好，那个能够勾到读者注意力的开头。那再来呢 ，After writing about his personality and how they're different from each other,The writer then writes about how they met each other and how nice Brandon was to him and how he made him feel comfortable. 所以呢，我们看到主题句第二句是什么呢？ It seems impossible that Brandon and I could be friends, but we met in a strange way.
Okay. Again, that's giving us kind of introducing an interesting setting. And, it's the setting we were talking about earlier, the hospital.I was in the hospital with a broken arm. He shared a room with me the day before I was ready to go home. He was lively and friendly even after his surgery, and he made me feel comfortable.
Okay, so they shared a room together.
Right. They were both recovering in the hospital. Okay, that is an interesting place to meet someone. But also, it's very nice as well. You wouldn't expect to make a friend after you've just had an accident, right? So It's a happy turn of events, we could say. We could also say that this story has an interesting angle. It's an unexpected way of talking about creating an unexpected friend. So here, obviously, I think one thing that this story does, which we didn't think about in the brainstorm, is it doesn't actually talk so much about them being different, their personalities being different, or them disliking each other. It's more about the unexpected place that they became friends. So I think that is something you can consider as well. You don't need to think about a friend that you hated when you met them. You can just think about a time you didn't expect to make a friend, and then you made a friend. That's also something which you might want to do when you're doing this assignment. And I think surgery is a really interesting way of becoming friends. So our conclusion is our friendship means a lot to me. And here they could also expand the story as well. They could talk more about, what their friendship is like now. And I guess we will see that in a minute when we move on to our basic sample, because I believe the basic sample is based on this outline. So shall we take a break here and then start looking at some of these examples?
Sure.
Basic sample. Anyone who knows me will tell you that I'm quiet and shy, and I don't make friends easily. This is why people are always shocked to learn that I'm friends with Brendan. We are complete opposites. While I'm shy and withdrawn, he's outgoing and curious. He'll talk to anyone, no matter where he is. He tells jokes, laughs loudly when someone tells one, and hugs everyone goodbye. It seems impossible that Brendan and I could be friends, but we met in such a strange way that it felt like fate. I was in the hospital with a broken arm from falling off my bike. The day before I was meant to go home, he arrived to share my room. Even though he had just come out of surgery, he was lively and friendly. He made me feel so comfortable. I'm grateful for Brendan, and his friendship means a lot to me. Okay, so this did follow the outline in the way that we expected it to. Let's see. So the writer goes into a little bit more detail, don't they, on their personality, telling us more about them being shy and withdrawn.
他有用到 withdrawn 这个字，代表沉默寡言的，很内向的。
Yes, and I like this simple sentence structure they have in the first paragraph. While I'm shy and withdrawn, he's outgoing and curious. So you obviously know the while first clause and second clause for making comparisons. I think this is a really good bit of grammar for you to use in this specific assignment because we're going to be comparing two people, how they're different. So it's a very good one to do if you want to make a comparison in one sentence or in a very short amount of time.
Right, 所以呢，可以用到 while 这个连接词来带出两人个性的差异。像是我们可以说 While Seb is careful, patient, and kind, 逗号 I'm careless, impatient, and cruel. 好，带出我们两个人之间的差异。
Yes, makes it sound like very different people.
Right.
You could also, if you have a long sentence, you might want to make it into two sentences and then use a phrase that creates comparison. So you could say something like, Elsie is cruel, impatient, and careless. Full stop. On the contrary, I am friendly, kind, and generous. So, on the contrary there.
You're on the contrary.
Yes.
Can we use in contrast?
In contrast, you could say as well.
So both are okay.
Or by comparison. Those are all different ones you can use to show that you're about to say something very different about something or someone else. Where, when, or how to, as another way of saying anywhere or everywhere, anytime or anyhow, you know? So there's different ways of saying that. So he'll talk to anyone no matter where he is. It means he'll talk to literally everyone. Or he'll talk to anyone no matter what the time. He'll talk to anyone at any time. Those are different ways of saying that. All right, let's move on now to the advanced sample. Advanced sample. If I told you that my best friend is someone I've never met in person, would you believe me? I've known Miranda for 5 years, but I've only ever seen her face on a screen, since she lives thousands of kilometers away in Chile. But distance is no object. I feel a deep bond with her, as she is a thoughtful listener and a trustworthy confidant. Just like many friends, though, we're vastly different. I, for instance, love to spend my weekends out in nature. Miranda, on the other hand, hates the outdoors. She's as pale as a mushroom, and she often dramatically tells me that she'd perish if she had to sleep in a tent for even one night. How did two such different people come to call each other close friends? It's a funny story that begins with Korean celebrities and that might be specific to our generation. In middle school, I first heard the pop group Wiki Mickey's music and I went wild for it. In an online fan group, I met Miranda, who was just as into their music as I was. I thought she seemed cool, so we started chatting through direct messages. Soon, we were close enough that she began to confide in me when people in her life let her down. And it was the same for me. We dream of one day meeting in person, but even though we can't just drop by to say hi right now, we feel fortunate to have met online and deepened our friendship through voice messages, video chats, and the occasional email. So, looking at this passage, are there any words we want to look at before we wrap up?
Yes, 这边呢用到很多很好的用法哦，像是呢不成问题，你可能会想说是 be no problem or something， 但是它这边用的是 is no object. Distance is no object， 代表距离不是问题。再来呢，我们还看到像是一个副词 vastly， 它去修饰 different。好 ，instead of using very or extremely， 这边用到的是 vastly。So we are vastly different， 我们非常的不一样。那再来呢，他用举例的方式带出两人的差异。我一方面是如此 ，on the other hand， Miranda 却是相反的。
I think for me, one thing which I would like to point out here is the use of a simile. Now, similes are really good devices you can use in creative writing to add more color and make things more interesting. So here we have the phrase pale as a mushroom. So mushrooms are obviously very white or close to white, right? So if somebody is as pale, as fair-skinned as a mushroom, then they must have very white skin. Yes, that's all the time we have for today. We will be seeing you later in the month with more writing tips, so don't leave us for long, and we will see you very soon. All right, for English Digest, I'm Seb.
I'm Elsie. See you soon.
Bye-bye.